The first topic is how to modify the SAP menu for role-based training and use. The first thing, if you get your menu where it just has SAP menu, that's not enough. Like, it's not very user-friendly to have to travel into a logistics every time, to go down then to plant maintenance, to be able to find all your stuff. Like, for instance, maintenance processing, orders, notifications is all in there. But it's a lot of traveling to go through. And before we actually import a menu, I just want to make sure you can see the transaction codes in front of each of these actual transactions. So you have to go to Extra Settings and choose Display Technical Names. And while I'm on the topic of display, on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little triangle. That should be clicked on to expand to show all your options. You should be in insert mode, not overwrite, because overwrite, if you're trying to type a word inside a sentence, you're going to actually delete words in that sentence. So you should be in insert mode almost always. The other thing you should adjust is in this black triangle drop-down, pick transaction. So when you go into a transaction, you actually see the code on the bottom right-hand corner of what screen you're in. So if you're going to do a screen capture with like print screen or alt print screen, and you can send that to the help desk, they know what screen you're on. Okay, so now our menus are displaying what they need to display. I'm now going to import a planner's favorite menu. So this can be done in the template account. So you'd have a template account for planners, one for managers, one for operators, and so on, so that the system comes all automatic. So to bring in it manually, I have to go to Favorites, Upload. I browse to where my favorites are stored, and then double-click on the text file. In this case, I'll bring in the planner's favorites, this one here. And I'm allowing it to come in. And if you had existing favorites, you choose Append to add them to the bottom of your existing favorites. So now I have lots of favorites. So the basic top 10 favorites on top would be the ones that use most often. And then what I do is I organize the rest of them by folder so that it's alphabetical. So that if someone's looking for notifications, they just go down to the ends and there's everything about notifications. So it's a little bit easier to get to. So while I'm on the topic of menus, I should also mention that you can flip between menus with this button, User Menu. Basically, if you minimize your favorites, you'll see just the transaction codes that you're allowed to access. It's kind of your configuration. And this basically takes you back to the SAP menu. Now, one thing that's really useful about the SAP menu, even if you didn't even have favorites, is if you type any, it works with almost every favorite, every transaction code, just type the first two letters. Like, for instance, say you're dealing with maintenance plans. I put in the folder description IP00 just to remind you of this trick. So if I just type IP00, what it does is it makes the SAP menu everything to deal with maintenance plans, because that's the IP world. So it's everything about that. So it temporarily makes your SAP menu a focus menu on that kind of transaction. To go back to the full SAP menu, you just have to hit the SAP menu button, and you're back to that. So it's very useful if you forget a transaction or you're on a computer that doesn't have favorites and you want to get to something on, say, any of the topics like bombs, it's CS00. Just type that in and minimize the favorites, and you'll see everything to do with CS transaction, which is maintenance, bombs, and so on. So it's very handy. So that's the first topic about menus. And I'll actually add into this topic the idea of some of the default settings for your account. You could type SU3 here to get into your user settings. SAP user 3, that takes you into basic user profile. And if you forget that transaction, no problem. Just go to System, User Profile, Own Data. And it gets you to that transaction. Your data should be like your username, your phone number, department, and so on. But what's very important in these settings is your defaults. So your default date should be what your the company wants, and try to get everybody consistently the same way of displaying. The decimal notation, it has to be in this format for North America, unless you're French, like in Quebec or France, they do the decimal and commas reverse. Also, what printer are you using? You find out from your IT folks, what is the default printer that sets it to default to your Windows printer. Usually it's LOCL or local, something like that. And also, what time zone are you in? So this computer account, my account is set to EST. And this last thing is parameters. This is not supported by SAP much anymore, but it's very useful. So for default variables that will populate certain screens. So we can talk about that later when we're going into screens, how to find out what those variables are. For instance, this one of my favorites, PIN, is a profile defaulting for when you're making maintenance plans and task lists. It's very useful. It has tons of defaults stored in that parameter. If you don't have any PIDs, perhaps there's an Excel file that has PIDs that you can bring in for your role. Like this example here is a PID chart in Excel where you have a drop down for specifying what role you are. But this could also be created and populated by default for each role. So I'm just going to copy that data into the PID area, and then that creates all the PIDs that I want for my role. And I can customize the parameters if I'm, depending on who you are and what you want as your default work center and so on. So it's very customizable. And then save and have all this data defaulted in.